The photographs don't lie. Even when everything else has been rewritten, manipulated, or simply erased from official records, the photographs remain. And what they show should terrify anyone who believes the comfortable narrative we've inherited about human history. Look at this image from 1829, two women standing beside what appear to be children. Except those aren't children. Those are full-grown adults. The women tower above them by 3, sometimes 4 feet. Their proportions are perfect, their posture natural, their clothing period appropriate. This isn't a circus act. This isn't medical gigantism. This is something else entirely. Now, look at this photograph from 1856. A man standing next to a building entrance. The doorway behind him measures 12 feet high. He has to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head. He is wearing work clothes. He looks bored. This isn't staged. This isn't celebrated. This is ordinary life documented by accident. The pattern repeats across hundreds of similar images from the 1800s. Giants integrated into society. Giants working construction sites. Giants standing with families. Giants serving in what appear to be official capacities. All photographed with the casual indifference of people documenting their normal world. Then something happened. Somewhere around 1850, these photographs stop appearing, not gradually, abruptly, as if the people in them simply vanished overnight. What if 1850 wasn't just another year in human progress? What if it marked the end of something? The conclusion of a civilization we've been taught never existed. What if everything we think we know about the 19th century is backwards? The maps tell the first part of the story. Pull up any European atlas from 1820. Look at the vast interior of Asia labeled Tartaria, or Grand Tartary, an enormous territory stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. Not a vague geographic term, but a clearly delineated region with borders, cities, trade routes, maps drawn by cartographers who staked their reputations on accuracy. By 1860, that label has vanished. The same territory now appears divided between the Russian Empire, Qing China, and various smaller designations. The transition happened within a single generation, no documented conquest, no recorded wars of absorption, no refugee populations, no cultural integration periods, just replacement. Here is what makes this disappearance even more suspicious. When empires fall, we have documentation. We have records of collapse. Rome didn't vanish overnight. We have centuries of its decline meticulously recorded. The Byzantines left volumes about their final days. Even the Mongol Empire's fragmentation is well documented. But Tartaria? Nothing. No treaties of dissolution. No succession disputes. No refugee accounts. No resistance movements. Just silence. And into that silence stepped new powers claiming territories that maps from a generation earlier showed belonged to someone else entirely. The architecture tells the second part. During the exact decades when Tartaria disappears from maps, massive buildings begin appearing across the world with suspicious uniformity. San Francisco emerges from gold rush settlements to construct world-class exhibition halls. Chicago erects entire exposition cities in 2 years. Melbourne, a colonial outpost, builds structures that rival European cathedrals. The official narrative calls this progress. Industrial revolution, human ingenuity overcoming impossible odds. But there is a problem with that explanation. There are almost no photographs of these buildings under construction. No documentation of the massive labor forces required. No supply chain records for the millions of tons of stone. What we have instead are dedication ceremonies, opening celebrations, official histories written decades later, and a suspicious uniformity in the story. These buildings represent the triumph of this nation or that empire, built by unnamed workers completed against all odds. The evidence suggests something different. Not construction, but inheritance. These buildings weren't built in the 1850s. They were already there. The plaques, The ceremonies, the official histories, were simply reattribution. A new civilization claiming the infrastructure of an old one. Consider the engineering. How does a frontier town build a structure requiring advanced knowledge of load distribution, harmonic resonance, and atmospheric electricity? How does a colonial settlement construct buildings with mathematical precision that modern architects struggle to replicate? Unless the tools weren't primitive. Unless the builders weren't who we think they were. Unless these structures were inherited from a civilization that possessed technology we're only beginning to understand. The giants were the administrators of this inheritance. The photographic evidence makes this clear. They're not pictured as curiosities or medical anomalies. They're shown in positions of authority, standing before government buildings, overseeing construction projects, posed in formal official contexts that suggest administrative responsibility. Their size wasn't accidental, it was functional. The buildings make sense when you place a 9-foot-tall human in the frame. The doorways aren't excessive. They're proportional. The staircases aren't ceremonial. They're practical. The furniture isn't decorative. It is sized for actual use. But around 1850, something changed. The giants disappeared from photographs. The maps were redrawn. The official histories were established. And the questions stopped being asked. What caused this transformation? The evidence points to a global catastrophe that conventional history has systematically obscured. May 19, 1780 provides the first clue, the dark day. Contemporary accounts describe the sky turning black across New England and parts of eastern Canada. Not cloudy. Black midday became midnight. Livestock returned to barns thinking night had fallen. The official explanation blames forest fires and atmospheric conditions, but reports of similar phenomena appear across multiple continents in the years surrounding this date. 1783 sees the Laki eruption creating dry fog across Europe. 1784 brings widespread crop failures. 1785 to 1786 feature blood moons and unseasonable cold. These weren't isolated natural disasters. They were the atmospheric signature of civilizational collapse. The kind of event that would explain why Tartaria vanishes from maps after 1780. The kind of catastrophe that would leave behind empty cities, waiting to be rehabited. By 1850, the reset was complete. The infrastructure had been claimed. The giants had been eliminated or relocated. The maps had been redrawn. The photographs that document this transition show us the exact moment when one world ended and another began. Look at the timeline, 1780 to 1785, atmospheric catastrophe. 1785 to 1820, the inheritance period. Surviving populations claim empty cities and create foundation myths. 1820 to 1850, historical revision. Encyclopedias are rewritten. Academic consensus is manufactured. 1850 to 1900. The narrative solidifies. The coordination problem disappears from academic discussion. The missing construction documentation goes uninvestigated. And anyone questioning the official timeline is systematically marginalized. But there is another layer to this story that makes the cover-up even more disturbing. The hospitals and asylums. During the exact period when the giants disappear from photographs, there is a massive expansion in what were called insane asylums across America and Europe. These weren't just medical facilities. Many were built with the same oversized proportions we see in government buildings. Massive doorways, towering ceilings, furniture, scaled beyond normal human needs. The official explanation claims these proportions were designed to intimidate patients or create a sense of institutional power. But what if they served a different purpose? What if these facilities were built to house survivors of the old world who no longer fit into the new narrative? The patient records from these institutions reveal disturbing patterns. Many inmates were described as suffering from delusions of grandeur or false memories of a different world. They spoke of advanced technologies, of global communication systems, of energy sources we didn't recognize. The doctors diagnosed these as symptoms of madness. But what if they were testimonies from survivors of the reset? The treatment protocols were particularly brutal for patients who insisted on describing alternative histories or technologies that didn't match accepted knowledge. Electroshock therapy, isolation, experimental procedures designed to erase memory and reshape cognition. The goal wasn't healing, it was forgetting. The orphanage system underwent parallel transformation during this period. Institutions designed to house children of unusual size began appearing across America and Europe. The official records describe these facilities as serving exceptional children, but the architectural specifications reveal something more specific. Dormitories with ceiling heights of 15 feet, dining halls with tables and chairs scaled for occupants much larger than normal children, classrooms with oversized desks and teaching equipment. These weren't accommodations for slightly larger than average children. These were facilities designed for young giants. And the curriculum taught in these institutions focused heavily on adaptation and integration into normal society. Students were taught to minimize their physical presence, to avoid drawing attention to their size, to accept that their memories of a different world were symptoms of developmental disorders. The graduation records from these institutions show students being placed in remote locations, often as manual laborers, groundskeepers, or caretakers for large estates. Positions that kept them isolated from general society while utilizing their physical capabilities for specific functions. The placement system ensured that surviving giants would be scattered, separated, unable to organize or share collective memories. Consider the Iowa discovery of 1856. Construction workers digging a foundation broke through an arched vault, 10 feet square, built with walls 14 inches thick. Inside, 8 human skeletons of gigantic proportions, measuring 8 to 10 feet in length. The local newspaper reported it matter of factly, then the story vanished. No follow-up investigation. The vault was filled in, the building constructed, and the discovery forgotten. This wasn't negligence, it was policy. Throughout the 1800s, similar discoveries appeared in local newspapers across America, then disappeared from official records. Wisconsin, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Pennsylvania. The pattern repeats: local discoveries, brief mentions, then systematic erasure. The skeletons were sent to the Smithsonian. They arrived. They were cataloged. Then they vanished. Not destroyed. Not lost in fires. Simply removed from collections without explanation, without documentation, without any paper trail. Why would institutions systematically suppress evidence of human biological diversity? The answer lies in what these discoveries actually represented. Not random genetic anomalies, but evidence of a specialized population. The giants weren't rulers or gods. They were administrators, overseers, guardians of infrastructure and technology that required their scale to operate effectively. Look at the tools they left behind. Museums catalog them as industrial equipment, without explaining what industrial process would require wrenches measuring 4 to 6 feet in length, weighing 200 pounds each. Tools designed for hands much larger than ours, with wear patterns that prove actual use. The furniture tells the same story. Chairs with seat heights of 30 to 36 inches, nearly double the standard that accommodates normal human proportions. Not thrones, not ceremonial pieces. Ordinary chairs designed for daily use by people whose physical requirements were fundamentally different from ours. The transportation infrastructure reveals another layer of the cover-up. Railroad systems constructed in the 1800s featured stations and maintenance facilities with unusually large proportions, platform heights, ceiling clearances, and doorway dimensions that exceeded practical requirements for normal-sized workers and passengers. The official explanation attributes these specifications to industrial requirements or aesthetic preferences. But examination of original construction blueprints shows something different. These facilities were designed to accommodate operators of exceptional height and strength. Railroad maintenance required individuals capable of lifting massive components, reaching elevated systems, and operating equipment scaled beyond normal human capabilities. The railroad expansion of the mid-1800s wasn't just about connecting territories. It was about utilizing the final generation of giants for large-scale infrastructure projects. The mining operations tell a similar story. Deep shaft mining expanded dramatically during the exact period when giants disappear from surface photography. Underground excavation required workers capable of moving heavy equipment through confined spaces, operating in extreme conditions, and maintaining complex mechanical systems. The mining boom wasn't driven solely by resource demand. It was a systematic deployment of remaining giant populations to locations where their existence could be controlled and concealed. When mining operations expanded into remote territories, the workers were housed in company towns with restricted access. No outside visitors, no journalists, no photographers. The official explanation emphasized safety and operational security. But these restrictions also ensured that the surviving giants remained hidden from public view, while their labor value was maximized. When you place a 9-foot-tall human in these architectural contexts, everything suddenly makes sense. The proportions become logical. The engineering becomes practical. But when these operators disappeared, the buildings became museums of incomprehensible purpose. The timing of this disappearance corresponds with another phenomenon conventional history refuses to acknowledge: the mud flood. Cities buried under meters of sediment. First floors converted to basements. Streets raised. Entire ground-level architecture submerged and forgotten. Photographs from the late 1800s show construction crews digging out buildings, not constructing them. Windows that appear to be basement. Windows were originally ground. Floor windows, the evidence is visible in every major city if you know how to look for it. This wasn't gradual change. It was catastrophic reset, and in the chaos that followed, survivors adapted existing infrastructure to their own needs, creating foundation myths to explain buildings they didn't construct, technologies they didn't understand, and proportions that no longer made sense. The education system underwent simultaneous transformation during this period. Before 1850, educational curricula included subjects we'd now consider impossible. Advanced mathematics that assumed different physical constants. Geography lessons covering territories that no longer existed on maps. History classes discussing civilizations that had been erased from official records. The great reform movements of the mid-1800s weren't just updating outdated information. They were systematically removing knowledge that contradicted the new narrative. Textbooks were rewritten, not improved. Libraries were reorganized, not expanded. And teachers who continued teaching pre-reset knowledge found themselves unemployed or institutionalized for spreading dangerous misconceptions. The linguistic evidence provides another disturbing clue. Many European languages underwent systematic purification movements during the 1800s. Words with Tartarian or Central Asian origins were removed from dictionaries. Grammar structures that didn't fit Indo-European patterns were declared archaic and eliminated. Pronunciation guides were standardized to erase regional variations that might preserve pre-reset linguistic memory. These weren't natural language evolution. Language doesn't change this rapidly without external pressure. The linguistic purification was coordinated across multiple countries, multiple languages, multiple academic institutions. Someone was systematically removing linguistic evidence that connected European populations to the vanished civilization. The religious institutions played a crucial role in this transformation. During the exact period of the reset, many churches underwent architectural modifications that obscured their original proportions. Ceilings were lowered, doorways were reduced, furniture was replaced with human-scaled alternatives. The official explanation blamed these changes on practical maintenance or aesthetic updates. But examination of the original construction reveals something different. Many churches were built with the same oversized proportions as government buildings. The modifications weren't improvements. They were adaptations. Someone was retrofitting religious architecture to hide evidence of its original occupants. The religious texts themselves underwent systematic revision. Biblical passages referring to giants were reinterpreted as metaphorical rather than literal. Archaeological references to large-statured peoples were explained as poetic exaggeration, and theological discussions about the physical nature of pre-flood humanity were quietly removed from seminary curricula. The immigration patterns during the mid-1800s provide another piece of the puzzle. Massive population movements occurred precisely during the Reset period. But these migrations don't follow traditional economic or political pressures. Entire communities relocated from Central Asian territories to remote locations in America, Australia, and rural Europe. The official records describe these as religious persecutions or economic opportunities. But the destinations were curious. These populations were settled in isolated areas, often in regions that required extensive manual labor, mining communities, railroad construction sites, large agricultural operations. The immigration wasn't random resettlement. It was systematic deployment of populations who possessed knowledge or physical capabilities useful for specific purposes. The documentation around these immigration waves is surprisingly sparse for such massive population movements. No detailed passenger manifests, no comprehensive settlement records, no cultural integration studies. The silence suggests these weren't ordinary immigrations, but coordinated relocations designed to serve specific functions while maintaining secrecy about the true nature and origins of the relocated populations. The royal bloodlines fit into this pattern. During exactly the period when Tartaria disappears and the giants vanish, European nobility undergoes suspicious genealogical transitions. New families appear with minimal documentation, marry into established dynasties. Then their origins become unquestionable fact. The genetic studies that could verify these genealogical claims have never been conducted, despite modern technology that could easily map actual bloodlines versus claimed heritage. Why the resistance to genetic verification? The technology question haunts every aspect of this investigation. The buildings that supposedly represent 19th century achievement demonstrate engineering capabilities that modern science struggles to explain. Free energy systems built into architectural features, harmonic resonance chambers that amplify sound and electromagnetic fields, water purification systems integrated into the very structure of buildings. We're told these features are decorative or coincidental, that 19th century builders accidentally created complex energy systems while trying to build simple government offices. But that explanation requires us to believe that primitive tools produced effects that modern engineering can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. The fires provide another disturbing pattern. Count the major fires that destroyed royal residences, government archives, and genealogical records between 1650 and 1850. The Royal Palace in Madrid, 1734. The Library of Congress, 1814. Multiple fires across Europe, most records lost. These aren't random accidents across centuries. They cluster around specific periods when old records would contradict new official narratives. After each fire, the reconstruction of records favored newly established bloodlines, newly claimed territories, newly documented histories. The pattern suggests coordination beyond coincidence. Someone was systematically removing evidence that would challenge the emerging narrative of the reset. The silence around these questions isn't accidental. It is coordinated. Not through conspiracy, but through institutional gatekeeping. When giant skeletons were discovered throughout the 1800s, they were sent to the Smithsonian for examination. The Smithsonian now claims no such specimens exist in their collections. Hundreds of skeletons all vanished without proper documentation. When architectural anomalies are noted, they're explained as decorative excess. When photographic evidence contradicts official timelines, it is dismissed as misidentification. When maps show civilizations that officially never existed, they're labeled as cartographic errors. The pattern repeats across continents, across cultures, across centuries of scholarship. It is not active suppression. It is passive erasure. Questions that simply aren't asked. Evidence that isn't examined. Dots that aren't connected, because connecting them leads to conclusions that don't fit the established narrative. But the evidence persists. The photographs remain in archives. The buildings still stand with their impossible proportions. The maps survive in collections, all waiting for someone willing to ask the questions everyone else has agreed not to ask. What we call the 19th century might have been something entirely different. Not an era of unprecedented progress, but a period of recovery from catastrophic loss. Not the triumph of human ingenuity, but the careful appropriation of inherited infrastructure. The world reset in 1850. The giants who administered the old civilization disappeared. The maps were redrawn to hide older borders. The buildings were claimed by new occupants who created foundation myths to explain their sudden appearance, and we've been living in the aftermath ever since. The comfortable narrative tells us we're climbing towards some technological pinnacle. But what if we're actually climbing back up from a fall? What if we're recovering fragments of knowledge we once possessed and then somehow lost? The evidence suggests we're not advancing into new territory. We're rediscovering what was always there. And the reset of 1850 marked the moment when that rediscovery became deliberate, systematic, and carefully controlled. The photographs don't lie. The buildings don't lie. The maps don't lie. Only the explanations lie. And somewhere in the gap between what we can see and what we're told to believe, there is a truth about human history that changes everything. The world reset in 1850. The giants vanished. The maps changed. And we're still living in the aftermath of that transformation. Walking through inherited cities using recovered technologies, following rewritten histories that hide the civilization we replaced. Nobody talks about it because talking about it requires admitting that everything we think we know might be backwards. That progress might be recovery. That the 19th century might have been the end of something, not the beginning. This coordinated ignorance serves a specific purpose. It protects a narrative that justifies current power structures, current technological limitations, current understanding of human potential. If the reset of 1850 revealed that previous civilizations possessed superior technology and achieved global coordination we still haven't matched, then everything we believe about progress becomes questionable. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. The reset happened. The evidence remains, and the truth is still there, waiting to be rediscovered by anyone willing to look beyond the official narrative and ask the questions we're not supposed to ask.